Hello, everyone. It is Ty Walden here. I am here with Lyndsey Sauer from DNVR. Lyndsey, how are we doing today?
I am awesome, Ty. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome, anytime. Um, so last Sunday, I can't even
Crazy.
explain it. Such a, it was a really thrilling, huge win. Having it right at the gun, it seemed that everything was going downhill, and then something happened. Like there was a spark, and then just at that 0-0, we got that touchdown to win the game against the Chargers. But I guess in that regards, what stood out to you the most in that game?
Yeah, I mean, it was a thrilling game at the end. Obviously, the first three quarters were not thrilling. And what stood out the most to me was honestly, if we're looking at the game as a whole, it was really poor play, right? I think that the play calling was poor. I think it's been poor in the past. So I'm really nervous about that for the Broncos, kind of more than anything. We allowed like 200 plus rushing yards in the first half. That was awful. So there was you know, a lot of locks, foot movement, his just the three and out after three and out. So there was a lot that stood out. That's what stood out the most is kind of almost the poor playing than anything else.
Mhm.
But on the flip side and on the positive side of that, within that last quarter and a half, what stood out the most, of course, was our grit, right?
Mhm.
And walking through that adversity and never giving up. So that is exciting. That's the fun part that stood out in that game.
Definitely agree. Play calling, I think, has been a thorn in our side for quite a few games. I mean, even I said myself, like, if this continues, like, are we gonna see a change in the guard at offensive coordinator because these plays have been so bad? Because let's be honest, Drew Lock, this was his 10th game, so there's some that can be blamed on him, but there's a couple of others where it's just like bad execution, especially when it comes to time management, calling the plays that need to be called, and it's just been a mess offensively. And it kind of is a shame because of how well our defense has been playing lately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think everyone's had enough time on the offensive coordinator side to understand who they have in Drew Lock, who I understand that we're the youngest offense in the NFL. And so that's when it's frustrating when you hear fans a lot just want to throw in the towel and give up on this team right away. That I don't agree with. But I also am trying to understand, hey, we've seen enough of Locke, especially what he did in college, to understand who this kid is. And so I just think that there is a lot of whether it's miscommunication or misunderstanding between what you want this offense to be and who they are and what kind of play calling you have going on. So it is concerning.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to like I can remember with the Kansas City game how well we were doing in the running game, especially with the Chiefs, how bad their run defense is, and just it's just various times in different games. Whereas like last 5 minutes of the Patriots game, we're throwing deep when we don't need to, or when we're abandoning the running game against the Chiefs when their run defense is not that great. And then with the Chargers, obviously, just that slow start and not being able to adjust on the fly.
Yeah, and throwing little check downs on third and long, continuously. I mean, it's poor management, like you said, poor management of the clock, poor management of the play calls in general. So it's very concerning, and I am not quite sure what to think of it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this game kind of flipped the switch and we'll get somewhere going in the next couple games.
Fingers crossed, right?
Right. Speaking of flipping switches, we were talking a little about Drew Lock and how he had flipped a switch and played so well. I guess like halfway through the third, but definitely during the fourth quarter. In your opinion, what impressed you the most about his performance?
I think what's always impressed me about Drew is being able to flip a switch. I think that it's impressive in any athlete when you're just, whether you're far down in points or maybe it's even a close game, and you can pull that grit out inside of you and flip a switch and win a game, or just come back from a huge deficit and make it a close game and make it interesting. And I think that not only do we have a gunslinger in Drew, and I think that Drew is ultimately going to be a good fit in Denver. I'm still hopeful of that, but I think being able to flip a switch in any game is a weapon. I think that's definitely a weapon. And so that's what I'm really most impressed in that. I'm most impressed with even having, 5,700 fans that are booing you off the field to come back and to win and to win aggressively and, to charge down the field, 80 yards down the field with a little less than 2 minutes left, and get that momentum going and to invigorate your team again. That's impressive. I think that the quarterback position is the hardest position, right? It's the goalie of hockey, it's the pitcher of baseball. These are really, really difficult positions. When you lose a game, they blame the QB. When you win a game, they pride the QB. And so I think that for Drew, he is a natural leader. He is a team player. He understands when he needs to tell himself that it's his fault for XYZ. And he also understands when to give accolades and pumps his team up. So I think overall, Drew is a really, really great leader, and that's what you want more than anything in your QB. I think that that's what Denver has been missing in their QBs for the last 4 years, right? So I really am impressed by the style of leadership that Drew has, and most importantly, the respect that he holds in that locker room. I think that his teammates really have a lot of high respect for him. So I'm really impressed with that too.
Yeah. You brought a lot of really great points in that, especially look at all the quarterbacks we've dealt with since Peyton Manning retired. There's just too many, a carousel of quarterbacks, but I definitely think he's definitely something, like, it's a breath of fresh air to have a quarterback that admits, like, okay, I did something wrong, I'm gonna work on fixing this, and praising his players when they make a big play. Like, I know he praised Deshaun Hamilton, like, you need to watch this guy, he's a wild card, because a lot of people are down on Deshaun Hamilton, and just the amount of, I'm trying to think of the word, basically what he does to lift up his teammates to get them going. I think giving them that positive reinforcement, that's what I was looking for, will help this team in the long run, especially when it comes to chaining together these wins and being able to build that chemistry and trust one another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all about getting guys motivated, getting them pumped up, leading that team. Look, this is the NFL. Any given Sunday, right?
Right.
You have professional athletes out there, and we'll get into it later when we talk about the Falcons. But, again, that's a team that has a terrible record and can still, for one, I think that they have a lot of talent, and their team is much better than their record, states. But it's truly any given Sunday, and these guys are fighting till the end. And so if you can be that leader, if you can be that motivator, if you can be down 24-3 with basically a quarter and a few minutes left and bring your team back with a victory, that is impressive. That is exciting. That's what I think you hold on to when you're rebuilding a team.
I definitely agree with that. It's really going to help going forward. And I think as long as he just works on the mechanics every little step that he can, that I truly think, and I'm really hoping that he becomes that quarterback that we've been searching for all these years, especially with our track record of not being able to draft quarterbacks. He could possibly be, if he gets to where he needs to be, possibly the best quarterback Denver's ever drafted.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, again, it's a tough game out there to be able to draft, an athlete that you think is going to fit into your core. And I think that we tried fitting other quarterbacks into a Super Bowl roster, and it just didn't work. And there's many reasons to that. I think that there's as much as I'm like positive on Drew Lock, I also understand the negatives. I understand that, hey, okay, if he doesn't have certain mechanics down now, is he ever going to? I understand that is scary and unnerving. I also think it's unnerving that, we didn't see that switch until late in the third quarter. I think that there's been other games like that. Other analysts, our guys over at DNVR have mentioned, okay, that entire first game with the Chargers, we didn't see the swag. We didn't see the confidence that we usually see in Drew. There's definitely been other games where we don't see that confidence, where we don't see that swagger. And you have to ask yourself, why? Is that just who Drew is? If that's who Drew is, then he's not going to be a playoff quarterback, right? He's not going to take you to the Super Bowl. If he's too inconsistent, then he's not your guy. And so I understand, just being leery of, is this going to be our franchise quarterback? But like I said, I think that as we're in this rebuild and we have a really young core, that as this season goes on, we take away those wins. And in that particular game with the Chargers, there was huge wins in that last quarter and a half. And that is what you hold on to. And that's what you try to build off of.
I definitely agree with that. Speaking of building off of, despite all that we've dealt with, the injuries, the heartbreak, the tough times, I know we are entering into our halfway point of the season. So what are your realistic thoughts on how this team will do for the remainder of the year?
I'm always a hopeful fan. So every week I will go into my pick'em leagues and I'll pick Denver, and I will go into that game just hopeful that we'll pull out the W. With that said, I don't believe we're going to be making the playoffs. I think that we will make games interesting, and I'm hopeful that we will make them close, except against the Chiefs. I mean, the Chiefs right now, I mean, Mahomes is a cheat code in and of himself, but they have too many weapons, and we have too many injuries. So I don't think that those particular games will be close, but I do think we'll have a few wins. I think we'll win against this Falcon team. I think we have potential to win against the Raiders. I think the rest of the season is just close games that I think it'll unfortunately will fall short of the playoffs. But honestly, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that as long as we make the rest of these games close, competitive games.
Definitely. That's hit it right there, nail in the coffin right there. That's exactly what I was thinking. I won't be that upset if we miss playoffs. It would be a bonus, but if we definitely can make these games close, it definitely tells us fans that we are literally one step closer. We just need to get a little bit more momentum, get gelled together, and maybe get another few key pieces that'll help out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are, we've got Purcell out, Miller out, Sutton out. There's just so many injuries, and we won't be getting those guys back. I mean, I know there's talks of Vaughn coming back at the end. I'm crossing fingers. I obviously would want that to happen. But in what capacity, is he going to actually be healthy? I err on the side of let's wait until you're fully healthy to have skin in the game, because I don't think that we will be making the playoffs. So to me, it's not worth bringing Vaughn back unless he is truly, truly healthy. If he is, great. I mean, that's awesome, and that'll give us an extra push to possibly make those playoffs. But yeah, I think it's a bonus if we make the playoffs this year, as long as we stay competitive and as long as we keep these games close and as long as we see some consistency from Locke and this young offense, and the play calling to me gets a lot better. Then I hold this season to a success.
Perfect answer. That's all I can say. So we get to our 8th game of the year, which this technically should be our 9th game. I'm not sure. But
Yep.
we play Atlanta to play the Falcons. Super Bowl 33 rematch, 20 plus years later.
Yeah.
So what do you think it will take to beat the Falcons in Atlanta on Sunday?
I think that we will win in Atlanta. I think that we need to contain, your Julio Jones, your Calvin Ridleys, and if we do that, which I think we can, because I do think the defense is playing elite. I know we're missing a few key guys, and I know that there were times in the Chargers game that we weren't as sharp as we have been, and at the same time we played incredibly sharp in like the first half, right? So
Mm.
if we're consistent, if we can keep our defense off the field, and not just continue a lot of these 3 and outs, that's going to be key for us. So we need to level that playing field out a little bit and make sure that we're not just killing them. Then I think we come away with a W. I think we are the better team, and I think that we do, have a lot of weapons, especially as the offense grows together. The connections between Locke and Judy, Hamler, all of those guys, all of those weapons that we do have, I think that progresses just week to week. So overall, if we can contain their weapons and we give and we feed Phil. I mean, Phil is a weapon. There's just no other way to say it. If I think that also in the locker room, I think that you need to announce. I almost think that there needs to just be an official announcement of Phil being a captain, a leader. I don't care that they're all young. So at this point, I think that there was that stigma of like last year, the year before, well, Phil needs to be the leader because that's just who he is as a human being. But he's too young and he's still working with all these Super Bowl vets, right? And just vets in general. So there's just a stigma of like we really can't make him that guy. I think that whether it's coaching staff, your core teammates, whatever it is, needs to step up to the plate and say, Lyndsey needs to be, the voice of the Broncos. He needs to pump this locker room up. I think that is key. I think that's key.
Run game is definitely key, especially running that clock and keeping the other offense off the field.
Absolutely.
speaking of that, since we were talking a little about Philip Lindsay, which player currently on the roster do you think will play the biggest impact on Sunday?
Yeah, I definitely think it's Phil, and I also think it's Locke. I mean, all eyes are always on Locke. They're always on the QB in general. I think he's coming off a massive win. So if he is the athlete that I kind of portray him to be, in someone that is, when they are on their highs, that momentum continues. I think that he will go into Atlanta on a huge high, and I think if he has that swagger and that look in his eyes to be really competitive, and not to say that he wasn't before, but again, it's just in the way that he was playing in that first half against the Chargers and other games, he didn't have that. So I think that there is going to be that burning desire in him still, that we're going to see some really great performance out of both of those. I also think that a key player will be Fant as well. That connection between Locke and him is growing week to week. So I think we could see a big performance out of Noah as well.
Definitely. I think one player I might be keeping an eye on is, all right, that's going to be my first time trying to pronounce this while it's being recorded, but Okuwebunam could be a big.
Oh, you did good, I think.
I've been practicing ever since they've been getting it wrong on the broadcast. So I think with Fant, because I'm not quite sure what his status is. I think he's still, like, we could see in the Chargers game, he was still dealing with that nagging ankle injury. And I think last Sunday was kind of Okuwebunam's coming out party. Trying to say that so quickly. Because he had that touchdown that brought us within 3, and then he also drew that pass interference that gave us that go-ahead touchdown to win the game. So definitely tight ends are probably going to be big in this one.
Yeah, I mean, he needs to be the second tight end. He needs that. He obviously needs to work more on his blocking game, but I definitely think he is a weapon, is going to continue to be a weapon, and I'm looking at him too this week.
One final question for you, just to end on a little bit of a fun note. How did your love for the Denver Broncos come to be?
This is such an interesting question for me. I am a Colorado native, but surprisingly enough, and I love all sports. I've watched all sports my whole life, and I've been a proud supporter of all of our native teams for a long time, except the Broncos. I grew up in a household where my father did not like the Broncos. He did not like John Elway. He did not like Pat Bowlen. So I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for that, but it's just the truth. So growing up, I had 4 older brothers, and we all picked different NFL teams to watch. So I was basically playing fantasy football as a young kid, and I would just pinpoint certain players and watch certain players and fall in love with certain athletes on different teams. And then when I got into my early 20s, I'm 35 now. So when I got into my early 20s, I said to myself, this is ridiculous. That I don't root for my hometown football team. And football had always been my favorite sport. So my love came from sheer annoyance with myself of not supporting my hometown team. And then it was only a few years after that we brought Peyton Manning on too. So my love just came in my early 20s, and I've loved them ever since. And I've loved every Colorado home team prior to that. So I'm just a huge homer.
I honestly think that's probably the most unique answer to that question I've ever asked anyone. So I kind of like that.
What made you become a diehard Bronco fan?
All right. So I'm trying to think of how it was 1998. I think we all know what happened in 1998, the Broncos winning their first Super Bowl. It was actually the first NFL game I ever watched as a fan.
Cool.
My mom was,
Kid.
yeah, my mom was stationed. She worked at, she served in the Air Force for a little bit. So she like met like some couple friends in the Philippines. One of her friends happened to live in Colorado, so this friend took her to a Broncos game, and that's how she fell in love with it. And they were watching. I think I don't remember when she started watching. I think it was during the heartbreak Super Bowls of when we were losing to like the likes of the Washington football team, the 49ers, and the Giants at the time. So she and I think our family had the game on. I knew nothing about football, being this little 7, 8 year old kid, and just like watching the game in awe, seeing John Elway do the helicopter, and then Davis with his big game. It was Super Bowl 32 that made me fall in love with the Broncos.
I love that. I love that. Even as a kid, when, I obviously watched all of that and I remember being excited. I remember loving Terrell Davis. I remember loving a lot of athletes on that team and being excited about it. It was just, crazy because during the entire season, it wasn't who I was rooting for. But I remember vividly that year and all of those great players. And so I was a fan of other certain players as I again played my own little fantasy football with my brothers. But yeah, what a great year to become a fan though. That's exciting.
Right. Very first Super Bowl, like knew nothing about it. And like especially the following year watching them go 14-2 and winning it again. It was like, this is my sport.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, to that point, we are a winning franchise. This fan base is used to a winning franchise. And I'm sure much like yourself, when you fall in love with a team and they're Super Bowl champs, and then you continue to have winning seasons, you have a few losing here and there, but for the most part, it's just all winning season. You get used to that. And so the fan base is frustrated. The fan base is running out of patience. And it's totally understandable. From my point of view, my entire family went to CSU. I've been a diehard CSU fan. Now, when I was growing up, CSU was incredible. We won a few WAC championships, and I love, we had some great years, but there's been many, 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 many losing years. And so I'm used to that. But that's what being a true diehard fan to me is. It doesn't matter how many losing seasons you have. You are always a fan of your organization. It doesn't mean you can't be critical. It doesn't mean that you can't boo them. Now, I'm not about insulting, personal insults on players of any kind, but you can boo, you can be upset as a fan. I support that. I totally get that. I don't boo. I'm not a booer, but I get it. But you also need to, I think, if you're a good fan and if you are a diehard fan, you need to take the wins. You need to take away the good things that happened in that game, even if it is a loss as well. So I think that this year, in particular, there's always been small wins to take away from every single game. So if we continue that trajectory, it may be slower than the fan base wants. But as long as you're on the uprise, I think that you should be excited about this young core.
Right. I'm actually with you right there. I can't boo for the life of me for some odd reason. It's just because I can tell a good amount of time they're trying. They're really trying. And it just sometimes the other team does a play or two that's better than them. Yes, they'll end up with a 3 and out, but like it's just really, I feel like it wastes a lot of energy just to boo a team that you're such a big fan of.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I guarantee you that every single player out there is trying and working as hard as they possibly can to not only retain their spot or get their spot or get that big paycheck or sign that big deal. I mean, every single one of them are professional athletes and they work their butt off. So it's a difficult sport. They all are, especially at that elite place that they're at. But you got to take away the wins when you can.
Definitely. Even in the losses, got to take away something.
That's right.
But I believe that's all I've got for you today. So,
awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me on. It was such a pleasure.
Of course. Glad to have you on.